Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of our third season of Territories Talk. This show brought to inform and unite the overseas territory and the Caribbean region. Tonight, we have special guests from our sister island, the Emerald Island of Montserrat. And, and without further ado, let me introduce our guests for tonight. Our co-host, Speaker Shirley Osborne, Sister President Nyota Mokia, and Honorable Paul Lewis of the House of Assembly of Montserrat. Good evening, everyone.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Chris.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
How are you all doing?
Well, I'm thankful for good health and strength.
All right.
Doing good.
Under the weather, but I'll do my best tonight.
No, yes, indeed. Solidarity, indeed.
The rallying, yes.
Yes. So tonight's topic is going to be on updates in our sister island of Montserrat in regards to recent developments. I have never been to Montserrat, so I can't speak to it. So we see we have 35 persons looking already. So it seems to be a very active audience. Good evening to the people in Montserrat. So I will turn it over to this Madam Speaker. The
All
floor is
right.
yours.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. And good evening to my guests. Thank you for
Good
pulling
evening.
up, Nyota. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll try not to have you tax your voice too much. So jump in whenever you're ready, whenever you feel like.
Sure.
So I want to begin by setting a little bit of context because the last program we did 2 weeks ago, we started talking about Montserrat, and there was quite a lot to say then. But then in the last couple of weeks, things have snowballed in Montserrat, and I mean the only way I could put it is that Montserrat is in turmoil at the moment. Things are kind of critical, and so the immediate question is how did we get here? So let me just very quickly set some context for those who are listening. Montserrat, as everybody knows, is struggling still with the after effects of the volcanic eruption that began in 1995. So we're 28 years in. Now, before that, people might not remember, Montserrat was a thriving, vibrant little island. In 1989, when Hurricane Hugo hit us, we had money in the bank. We were doing well. We had industries, we had activity, we had our full population, small as it was, and we were doing well. We had all kinds of artistic, creative, academic, industrial, political activity on Montserrat. Then Hurricane Hugo demolished the island, and in September, and in November, December, the British government thought it was the opportune time to impose a constitution. In the constitution, two things that they wanted were the financial services, which was one of the things that had kept Montserrat in the black. And so we were not in granting aid. We were taking care of all of our local expenses. And they took away financial services on the pretext of corruption, none of which was proven. And the issue of land. The chief minister at the time went to England with his people, and in the struggle, took the decision to hold on to the land and let them get financial services. And we struggled after that, but we pulled Montserrat back, and then we got hit in 1995 with the volcano, and we sort of been on a downward slide since then. Our population dwindled, not voluntarily, but Britain basically gave people no option. They forced, coerced, cajoled, whatever, people to leave. And so most of the population left. We were down to, some figures say we're down to 1,200 people at one point, because people were made to understand that there was no option, there was no reason to stay. And they were given a one-way ticket. Britain provided them a one-way ticket out of the country, and they were allowed to take one suitcase. So you couldn't even take mementos and so on. So the idea was that they would never be coming back. That, of course, is not doesn't bode well for a country. So they left, and so our people are scattered. Most of them in England at the moment. Some are still in the islands who had been so supportive of us at the time. Now, of course, the infrastructure. And we talked to Mr. Lewis about infrastructure because he used to be the Minister of Communications and Works. Infrastructure got damaged. We lost secondary school, hospital, government buildings, parliament building, roads, water, electricity, all kinds of things we lost. We have not had a serious eruption since like 2009, I believe. And so we are wanting to rebuild. In the interim, we have been working, our leaders have been working all kinds of ways to bring us up to speed. And there are all kinds of reasons why we have not succeeded. One of which is, quite frankly, that the support that we had expected and we had hoped and that had been promised from Great Britain has not been forthcoming. One of the things we hear about so often is moving of goalposts. So we need a hospital, we need a port facility, we need new schools, we need new roads, we need all kinds of things that we are not in a position to provide anymore because we no longer have any income. We don't have any revenue as a country. Yeah. And so we are struggling with those. And despite all the promises of Great Britain that they would support our rebuilding, we see that's not happening right now. There's a port being built in Montserrat, which is not even close to adequate. The hospital is still up in the air. They've been struggling with that for years and years and years. The roads are all over the place, full of potholes. And so Montserrat always had the best roads in the region. We're very proud of that. So we are in this place where in the last couple of weeks, the energy situation has got really dire, right? And so of course, you can't run a country without electricity. And we've been struggling with that. And again, Mr. Lewis will talk to you about this. The work to get our electricity back on stream, because we always, again, we never had electricity outages when I was growing up. But we had these old machines that we'd got since the volcanic eruptions, because the other ones, for some reason, were left in the old buildings in the old power station. And we have been struggling with them. They've been breaking down. They've been fixed and not fixed and broken down. And so the last couple of weeks, Montserrat has been not having electricity for the most part. The old generators have broken down. And that has led to a whole number of things cascading. Generators that people have been asked to keep the generators going at the hospital, the DMCA, and so on. And those generators are breaking down also. Water, which has never been a problem in Montserrat, is a problem again because of old generators not being able to stand up to the pressures, the needs right now. At the same time, to nothing to do with Montserrat, no fault of our own, the fiber optic cable, which had been placed 3-4 years ago perhaps, finally got cut somewhere off Antigua. And so we had telephone connection problems for a while. So we are in this place where it seems to all of us, Montserratians everywhere, that our country is literally imploding, falling apart, and we are on our knees in many respects. And so, but it hasn't been, it's not a hurricane that did this. It's just stuff. So the question I want to begin with, ask Mr. Lewis, who is the leader of the opposition. He also is the immediate past Minister of Communications and Works and Energy, which is responsible for electricity and for Montserrat utility services. And he also was the president of the Civil Service Association, which is interesting. So, Mr. Lewis, you're in Montserrat. And I know that yesterday, there was a meeting of the National Advisory Council was convened to talk about all these things, how we're going to fix these. We'll come to the leadership on that matter in a minute. But tell us just kind of what exactly is the situation in Montserrat right now? Update us on that.
Yeah, good night, listeners. Good night, host. Good night, Nayota. And good night to, is it Chris? Chris, yes. Mm-hmm. It's one of those situations where we are placed in a scenario of a post-hurricane where an island got hit heavily by a hurricane and then utilities goes down, and then you're trying now post-hurricane to get utilities back up. If you can think about that scenario and understand the scenario, that's the scenario that we find ourselves in. We did not have a hurricane, we were not hit by a hurricane, but that's the scenario basically, because what we are finding about last week, we found ourselves in a situation where at the power plant, we have a 1.5 medium speed diesel generator, and all the other generators, several other generators, they are high speed, what we call standby generators, but they're used in the meantime. Montserrat is expected to get and to install and to basically commission another 1.5 medium speed generator sometime in November, according to the government. We learned that about 2 months ago that the MOL, the Montserrat Utilities Limited, responsible for generation and supply of electricity, water, and also some sewage to some places in Montserrat, and they would have pointed out to the government what the state is at the generating plant, which is not good. Basically, you have that 1.5 medium speed generator working. You know, the generator that's overdue for servicing, and you know when a generator is overdue or engine for servicing, it can go anytime. And of course, there are some other standby generators which are down and require parts and so forth. And the parts at the time weren't on island, and so they could not be fixed. So we found that the one that was actually overdue for servicing, it went out and left us with just a 1.5 medium speed generator. We have a demand of some 2.5 megawatts, so about there. And if you have a 1.5, it means that you would, even if you're not up to the full 2.5 megawatt, but you're in excess of 1.5 megawatt, then it means that you cannot supply the whole country. Therefore, it leads to load shedding. This load shedding has brought much inconvenience, and also, unfortunately, many of the residents have been losing equipment, appliances, and having to dump food because the food are no longer good. And if they do not dump the food and they attempt to eat that food, it could result in even more chaos where food poisoning is concerned. So they're having to dump their food, and some are saying, look, we already bought our food and put it there to last us for the month. Now we have to dump it. We do not have the money to replace it. And of course, the appliances are down, like refrigerators, your washing machine, television, and things like that. I've been advocating on the radio for the government to replace these items, food items, and also equipment. If they cannot replace all equipment, at least some, because this is no fault of the persons out there. And by the way, it's not only persons in their personal homes, but businesses have been suffering loss of equipment as well and having to dump food. Those businesses who do not have a standby generator. And it's really hard for people at this moment. One, the inconvenience of the load shedding, and sometimes you have power, sometimes you don't. And two, the losses in terms of the food and equipment and appliances. So it's really not the best of times now where that is concerned. And as you were saying, Shirley, earlier, well, we have been we're routed to Guadeloupe in terms of the fiber optics while they're working on the damaged fiber between Montserrat and Antigua. So we're back up in terms of the telecoms, but still being, well, in load shedding electricity. What that has led to is that normally you would have the standby generators at the pumping stations for the water.
Oh, that one, yeah.
And somehow, I don't know, they say when something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And that's the case here where at two of the pumping stations, the generators, for some reason, they just went bad. And those are the area, that's the area that the power has been off most of the time. That's from just to Jones Hill, you have St. Peter's right back over to the southern part of the island. So the St. Peter's pumping station and the one at Bellum for the wells, actually you find that those went down and they had to turn, the water levels were at critically low water levels, and they had to turn back electricity on in this area until they got some replacement generators to borrow and now pumping water. At least one village lookout were experiencing some water issues, low levels of water. And that's why I said earlier that it gives you that feeling that you are just coming out, you're in the post-hurricane situation where you were hit by a hurricane and then all these things went wrong and so forth. Yeah. But actually, it's, in my opinion, a man-made crisis, because
So tell me about that. Let me ask you a quick question about that. Because it seems you're saying it like exactly perfect start. Anything that could go wrong is going wrong. Everything is just kind of falling in. How much of this? I think one of the things we need to establish. I'd like us to establish first is how much of this has to do with the care and maintenance, the monitoring, because I know machines like those, engines and so on, have a life. It's 10,000 hours, 15,000 hours, 25,000 hours, whatever. What did we in Montserrat miss something there, or is it what else is contributing?
The staff at Mull, I understand, through the board, did inform the government. And let me just remind you that the Mull is owned 100% by government, where the FS sits on the board and reports directly to the Honorable Premier Minister of Finance. And the PS for the Communication Works, Labour and Energy is the chair of the board and therefore reports to the minister. So both the Premier and the Deputy Premier, who is the minister, they are fully informed. And for whatever reason, whether or not they did not get the support, the financial support from elsewhere, they did not act promptly at the time 2 months ago when they got the information. And I will tell you one thing about engines, and if they're overdue for maintenance and you as a human being do not see it fit to act promptly, they're not going to wait on you. So whatever could go wrong will go wrong. So it's unfortunate that now that it has all fallen on the face, that is when the government is giving the authority to Mull to go and seek a standby generator in the meantime. So the guys there are working really hard at Mull, now trying to put back together one of those generators that failed. The part is in. They have managed to get some engineers from overseas to come in and assist them. So they are hoping that by Friday that they'll have that generator fixed and have a situation where they could be back off from load shedding and somewhat back to normal. But I think the problem here is greater than that, because there's no way that you should have these standby generators running a power plant. Your power plant is normally run by medium speed generators, not standby high speed generators. They will break down because they're not designed to run continuously like that. They're designed when you're having a carnival and you have those standby generators behind generating and supplying the band. When you're having a festival somewhere, just for short periods. But these been running day in, day out, night and 24 hours a day, 24/7. They will break down, and they break down pretty often. So we know that where we want to go in the future, it has to be with the renewables. Some time ago, as minister went out, according to the British, they wanted us to go out and look at the possibility of private sector investment in the geothermal plant. We went out and we found that we had about 5 international companies showing an interest and coming back in there saying, look, we'll have to generate at 15 US cents and then sell to Mull, and Mull has to put their overheads on that. But by the time that is finished, it will be too expensive for the people of Montserrat. So the committee assumed or came to a conclusion that you will have to be generating at 8 US cents for this thing to work. And that information was provided to the British government via DFID then, which is now merged into what is called FCDO. And when the government was changed in 2019, they once again asked the new government, which is the sitting government, to go back out again to do the same thing. So it's like a merry-go-round. And,
so let me ask you right there. Frank question, frank answer. We've known for years that Montserrat needed these things. You were there, you knew that they needed them. We needed them at the time. Why have we not got them yet?
Well, I said to you, even before our government, the government before our government was promised not just the geothermal wells, but the funding of the geothermal plant. And then somewhere along the line, they did the 2 wells and changed their mind about the plant. Agreed to do a 3rd well, but not to do the plant. And that's when they said, look, go out to the private sector to see what's the appetite out there. But there's the 2 things, not just an appetite, but we want to know that when you finish, that it's affordable to the people of Montserrat. And the whole promise that was promised to the people of Montserrat is that once the geothermal plant is up, electricity will be more affordable, because then you get rid of the fuel surcharge, because you will have no fuel and to pay for when you're dealing with geothermal plant. And I say the British went back on their promise, and it's a shame. It's really a shame. As a British overseas territory, and the British treating a British overseas territory like this. At the day back in the day when we did that assessment, the plant was said to be about a cost of about 15 million US dollars, and of course plus the enabling works. It probably would be a little bit more than that now with the inflation and all of that. But I tell you, whether it's 15 million US dollars or 20 million dollars, that's a drop in the bucket for the British government. If they really are serious about helping Montserrat to put these critical infrastructures in place.
Yeah. So we're not getting the infrastructure that we need, and so we are in this place right now. One of the issues that one of the things that this issue brings up is morale, local morale. People, we already been struggling with, people just feeling nothing's happening. We're not getting through. They say we're getting the hospital, we don't get the hospital. They say we're getting the geothermal plant, we don't get it. They say we're getting this, we're not getting it. And so we're in this position today where people are telling me, I mean, you all know I'm overseas at the moment. People are telling me, why even bother think about coming back, Shirley? I'm away for a few weeks. And people say, don't hurry and come back. Take your time, because people are so demoralized and upset. And one of the things that has been feeding into this all along, it seems to me that this energy issue, this water issue, this food and health, because then it boils down to that. All of these are connected. Schools are out at the moment, so it's not so bad. Kids don't have to be studying right now, but suppose they had to be. The hospital has been having trouble with their generator. DMC and hospital are connected, so if the hospital's having trouble, so there's a whole morass, a whole bunch of things that are not working, that obviously make people just want to throw up their hands and say leave this alone. But this does not, and of course, because the people on island have something to do with this. There are other things that have been impinging on Montserrat's ability to redevelop itself. And I want to move to Nyota for a minute, because the largest employer on Montserrat is the public service. People tell you that most of the people on Montserrat work for government. And if the people who work for government are the people who are driving the innovation and the work and the so on that we need to do to move Montserrat, and maybe even push the hand of the British so that they actually do what they say they're going to do, and they're having a hard time just feeling good about their work, obviously we're not going to make progress. So Nyota, as the head of the Civil Service Association, give us a little bit of a notion about how the civil service is feeling. And I'm asking you this in the context of what has been happening recently in terms of governance and what I personally am calling interference, but you will speak to that, and then we come back to flesh it out a little bit. What's going on with the people in the public service? How are they feeling about their work and the ability to make the island work?
Good evening, everyone, to the listeners out there. Firstly, anything that affects Montserrat, like you said, affects the public service. And it comes to a matter of national interest. At this time, with everything that's going on, yes, many of the membership feel undervalued. Lots of times they are unable to basically see their worth. Mm-hmm. So it's like you are trying to achieve a goal, but you're not getting there, not able to see it. And lots of persons are leaving because of that, as well as they're not able to aspire to some of the positions that they're willing to aspire to, because they're of the feeling that they are being pushed over. So if I go back to what Mr. Lewis said, there are instances where you provide information, it's not taken into account, so you feel like your input is not weighted enough. And what has happened is that they're bringing in persons from overseas who are telling them the very same thing, and then they pay attention to that. But the locals have done exactly what these other persons would have said already. And it's sad because you demotivate the membership, and people are who you need to drive a society, to drive the public service. And if these persons don't feel that or feel job satisfaction in any way, it means that you don't get the best out of persons. And that is why Montserrat is in its state that it is right now, because the lack of not listening or not following through or giving them the opportunities to give of their best at all times. I wanted to comment on a message in the chat. It says, why hasn't Montserrat built 2 wind turbines sufficient to generate enough electricity for 6,000 people?
Yeah.
Don't repair Asian generators exploit natural resources? I know in the past we did have wind turbines. I'm not sure if it has been explored recently, but natural resources is actually the way to go at this point. I don't know if Mr. Lewis in his time, if they had looked at wind turbines, but that's an interesting comment at this time.
Yeah, it's interesting because there were 2 wind turbines on St. George's Hill. They're still standing, by the way. They're not working, but they're still standing. So we've been looking at these things all over the years. So as a matter of fact, Montserrat has been looking about its development, looking at what we need for development. And we're having all of these problems with the infrastructure, with the hardware, if you will. But the point you raised, Nyota, about the people is a really important one. If people are not, people don't feel recognized and valued, and they don't feel settled, then they can't really produce. And one of the issues is that Montserratians have not been feeling settled at home for the longest while, because this idea of crisis, Paul talked about it. Right now, it feels the way it felt after Hurricane Hugo, as a matter of fact. They didn't have anything, but we've been kind of operating in that mode for the longest while. We have 2/3 of the island is shut off, and the newest dispensations are restricting access even more to our lands. We have these latest issues with people at work in the civil service, and the notion that nowadays the senior positions must all be advertised internationally. So the idea of working your way up to the civil service to get a senior position and so on has been taken away. So people are not seeing any point in staying home. Young people are saying, what's the point? Even older people are leaving. And this has been, what's the word? This has been, I mean, people have people coming to help them work all the time, training and so on. But this notion of replacing almost the work for the government.
But the thing is, Miss Shirley, the persons who are leaving, many of the persons who are leaving are persons who are qualified. These persons have been trained, have as well as they have the years of experience. Persons who often come from overseas, they are only skilled in one area. But for Montserratians, I would say that they're dual talented in terms of we have been trained over the years to be cook, bottle washer, clean, everything. We do every single thing. Because we have been trained from bottom up. Most persons that come in, they've been trained to wash, and they can do nothing else. And because we have that skill, we're able to use it to get where we want and to do exactly what we want. We just need to harness those talents properly, give persons the opportunity, and Montserrat will be good again. And I'm saying it's sad that persons are leaving at this time because only the people can save the people.
Yeah.
We need people in order to do exactly what is required on Montserrat. And we don't need, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, that there may not be certain instances where we require assistance, because We won't be able to do everything on our own. We need, like we said, the more hands on deck is the more we can do. But give local persons the opportunity to assist and pull their country and move their country forward. That is so important.
Yeah, you are perfectly right. They're leaving because people are leaving because they don't see the opportunity. They don't see the ability to the opportunity to advance. They can't see how they're going to move up and move forward. So that brings us to, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, if you will. Let's talk about British governance, because that is where all of this is coming from. The listeners might know that Montserrat got a new governor a couple of years ago, a little over a year ago or something, who has decided or has been instructed to change everything, fix everything, make everything work different, better, however. And clearly, just like you said, Mrs. Mulcair, we always want to be advancing. So I need of people to come and support and help. Whichever country you are in the world, whichever business you operate in the world, that is always something that just happens. But what has been happening since this new governor arrived has been what has caused consternation and confusion amongst not just people in the public service, but Montserratians generally, because we have, like I said earlier, we got this constitution in 1989, and then in 2010. And I remember one of the men who, Chetty Brown, Nyota Paul, who was on the negotiating team, told me that the issue of the governor's powers, they were told, was not on the table. The British government was not willing to discuss, negotiate anything. The governor was to have certain powers, and that's the end of that. And so we've had governors sent in by Great Britain all these years who have managed to work with respect, and put it this way, with respect and consideration for the people on island. This has not been the case with this particular governor. Nyota, the public service has felt some of the changes, shall we say, that she has instituted. I'm going to come to you, Mr. Lewis, about this also. But Nyota, talk to us about how some of the changes that have been wrought in the civil service under the instruction of this new governor. Let me just say that the governor, under Montserrat's constitution order that was sent over by Britain, has the authority through the deputy governor to manage the public service. I think that's pretty much the same for all the overseas territories in the region at any rate. How it's done, though, how that work is done has changed since she has come in. Talk to us about that, Nyota, please, from your perspective.
Okay, so several things have happened, but one of the points I want to touch on is the fact that the association would have worked hard to ensure that it had a seat at the table in several institutions and so on. For example, in the Public Service Commission, MCSA is allowed to have a representative on the Social Security Board, Labor Advisory Board, and various other boards, so that it can represent its members. And what has happened over the last year is that they've now, where certain protocols would have stated, okay, so MCSA is allowed to nominate somebody from the community with the required skills in order to represent its members in whatever capacity it may be. And what they've moved to now is that persons are required to show interest. So they're now saying that the MCSA should not write in to nominate its members, but whoever it may be can write in to show interest for them to choose from. But given the culture of Montserrat, persons are not willing to write in.
But Nyota, let me just but the culture is one thing, but if the Constitution says that the CSA can nominate, then the CSA can nominate.
But apparently, it seems as if Cabinet would have made a decision trying to override this to say that persons have to write in to show interest, and this is what they pick from. But what happened is persons are not writing in.
No.
So instead of reverting to what initially would happen, they are now turning around and selecting who they wish to sit on these boards. So where is democracy? You have eroded the pillars of democracy. And this is where uh, now they're going to talk about corruption and things like that. And then we wonder why things are happening. But if we allow these things to take precedence, it means that we're going to be in a sad place. And it's unfortunate because when you look at who make up some of these decision bodies, you have persons who would have been past members of MCSA or presidents and so on. So and persons who would have been members of the union who were pushing for some of these things. And now you're coming to change the wheel to the opposite direction to undo some of those hard work instead of fighting for your people, instead of insisting that this is what should happen, so that your people have a say with what happens to this nation. And that's not what's happening right now, which is really sad. And that's just one point. There's so many. But right now, that's a really sad situation, which I find we need to stand up for, we need to talk about it, we need to ensure that it goes back to it. And I challenge persons who are part of this decision making to stand up and say, well, no, this is what. Today you may feel that you are the minister of XYZ or whatever portfolio you may hold, but tomorrow you may not. But today, while you're in that position, you're helping to erode the pillars of our society. What happens tomorrow? So we need to stand up and let our decision be counted for, and let's not go back, because it's putting us back instead of taking us forward. And these are some of the things that we're facing, and they're just not in a good place.
Yeah. Mr. Lewis, I'm going to direct this next question to you, because the reality is that people in Montserrat are feeling that the governor is overreaching. She's getting involved in all kinds of things she's not supposed to. She's making pronouncements out of cabinet. She is speaking for ministers. She has been hiring and firing at will, evidently. The evidence suggests whoever she feels like, with not much consideration given to the union position or to how things are supposed to. I remember a previous governor telling me that he didn't think that the governor coming in, a person who had never been to the island, was the best person to come in to run the civil service. You don't know the culture, don't know the people, don't know the development, don't know what's going on, and that shouldn't be. But this particular governor, Mrs. Tucker, who came to Montserrat out of BVI, she was working the governor's office in British Virgin Islands, I'm told, and she was appointed to this office. She has been, and this is not a question, she has been involving herself in things that governors don't usually do. One senior person in government said to me that she's acting as if she's a minister. She's actually making ministerial decisions. The way it's in Montserrat right now, Chris, the update in Montserrat right now is that the governor's making decisions and voicing them that we think should be made by the premier or by the minister of whichever. And there's no pushback. There's nobody saying, no, hold on a minute. And before I come to you, Paul, let me just give a few examples. When the police officers, when the chief of police, the commissioner of police was fired and inspectors were removed from office, and the whole idea of retirement, not retirement, was done. Nobody in the government said, and I'm making a distinction between government and legislature because there is nobody in the government said anything. The governor chose to downgrade the security at the airport. I was told that when in the meeting, the airport officials objected, and she said no. The minister of the airport didn't object, didn't say anything in public, said something at some point about having a meeting and then we'll talk, and we heard nothing of the meeting. The governor decided that it was her decision, it was her place to inform the island that the bus fares were going to change and the bus drivers needed to put these things up in their buses and all kinds of things. And I mean, the last I heard is that, and this is this is this a week ago. She has complained to the bishop that a priest said something in church that she was upset about. I got this from a very reliable source. I'm not claiming that this is absolutely true, but I got this from a very reliable source. She was in church. The priest said something that she upset about. She filed a complaint to the bishop. So there is a governor who is literally interfering in how Montserrat works. Mr. Lewis, you are the leader of the opposition. People in Montserrat are upset, they're angry, they're annoyed. I mean, I've been to functions where she's and they avoid her. What is your role in reassuring? Because the government is not reassuring the people. What is your role in reassuring Montserratians that, yeah, we are not, like people are saying, being pushed out of our own island? That's the general sentiment on the island right now. That we are being overrun, we are being disregarded, and we're being run out of our yes, Graham Wall, it's exactly what they're trying to do. Mr. Lewis, what's your take on that?
Yes, section 39 1 speaks to the powers of the governor.
Mm-hmm.
It speaks to defense, responsible for defense, external affairs, the regulation of international financial services, internal security, including the police service, the functions conferred on the governor by the Constitution of any other law or matters, right, that's related to public service. And the thing about this Constitution, it goes on to say, despite the areas I just outlined, that a governor, in his or her discretion, can determine that another matter being dealt with by a given government falls within the areas just outlined, which is one of the issues I have with the Constitution. The Constitution should be speaking clearly to what are the governor powers and what are the elected government powers. So there's a great area there. But having said that, we have elected a government, and the government need to stand up and carry out their role. They need to stand up and carry out their role. The areas that they're responsible for, they should be leading on those areas. The governor sits in cabinet, but the governor is the chair of cabinet. The cabinet is made up of the premier, his three ministers, and of course you have the attorney general and the finance secretary that sit in cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
When they make a decision in cabinet, they need to stand up and tell the people what their decision is cabinet. If the governor go contrary to their decision, then we would see as a people that the governor goes contrary to their decision. If they sit there in cabinet and whatever decision is made there and the governor speaks for them and they have nothing contrary to say, then we have to assume that they're in agreement with the governor.
Mm-hmm.
When they make joint statements and they're in agreement with the statement, unless somebody comes out and says, no, I have asked for something else to be in the statement, it's not in there, so I'm not in total agreement with it. So we elect people, they represent us. If they believe the governor is going contrary to what they as a government are doing or believing, they need to say it. If they don't say it, we will assume that they're in agreement with what is being done by the governor. And if the people are saying that they're not happy with what's going on with the governor, then it means that the people are not happy with the way that the government stays silent when the governor do these things. If they're not in agreement, they should be coming out and say, look, we're not in agreement. Mm-hmm. So I think that our government need to stand up and say where they are, what the position is. So that's one. And two, I think that we definitely must push for constitutional change, because the Constitution gives some discretionary powers to the governor that even if a government really means well and insists on certain things, the governor have certain discretionary powers that could prevent the government from fully implementing what's in the best interest of the people of Montserrat.
So let's talk about the best interest of the people of Montserrat. We have about 15 minutes left, and I want us to get a couple of other things clear. I think it is fair to say that the general sentiment on Montserrat is that the British are recolonizing the place. They're taking us back 70 years. Montserrat had our first parliament in 1952. Yeah. And people have worked really hard to get to the place where Montserrat had some measure of control. Somebody in the chat asked a question about self-determination, where Montserrat stands on this. The reality is that there's a question of economic sufficiency that is limited, that we don't have. We don't have it not because Montserrat is incapable, but because, like you said before, Mr. Lewis, there is this shadow over Montserrat that inhibits Montserrat's ability to find its way. Let me put it this way. Montserrat is unable to make the decisions it must make for its own development because it has been handed this law that was agreed to in England, that they decided Montserrat must have, called the Constitution Order 2010, which gives the governor a whole wide range of powers and includes things like can make decisions which cannot be inquired into by any court. It says that the governor must consult with the premier on this, that, or the other, but somewhere else gives the governor a loop, a place out. And so we are stuck in this place where the decisions that would support our advancement cannot be made by us legally according to the constitution we've been given, and which include the ability to make money. And if you don't have money, your decision making is weakened. Montserrat is sent money every year, given budgetary aid by Great Britain every year, but just enough, just barely enough to get through, and not even that. And so I work with children in social services, right? It's like being in social services. They give you the dole that you get in England is just enough to keep you alive, not enough to allow you to grow. And that's where Montserrat is right now. And the changes that are being made in the civil service with regard to people's ability to be able to work and advance themselves and contribute to their country to the best of their ability with all the skills and education they have, that is being eroded. So we're not being allowed to go make our own money. We are not being allowed to use our own people to do our work. We are not being allowed to do a whole number of things that's seriously restricting our advancement. And this particular Mrs. Tucker has arrived, it seems, with instructions to just keep bearing down. There's no other way to put it. Just keep bearing, just keep pushing, push as hard as you can get, frustrate as many people as you can, because then we lose control of Montserrat. Why would they want that? We are coming up to election next year. One of the things that I hear people talking about already is things like constitutional reform, which the British government does not want. What is it? I want both of you to answer. What is it that the public service could do through the union or just as a group of people, Mrs. Mulcair, that can shift something, that can assert some independence, some autonomy? And on the other hand, Mr. Lewis, when she's done, can you tell me what it is that the people of Montserrat can do to the elected officers to shift something? Because we must. Mrs. Mulcair, what can the public service do?
So first of all, self-determination is the right for us to determine our political status, our economic or cultural development. And in order to do that, it cannot be just one individual or just several individuals. It has to be Montserrat collectively. And as a body, as a trade union, Montserrat Civil Service Association is not the president. It's every single member who has to join force to push back and agitate for these things to be in place. It's important that we don't allow our aspirations to self-determination be suppressed, but that we stand up and fight as an association to get the wheels turning, to create legislation, to put in the constitution what we want to see happen. But we can't just allow, we can't just say, okay, we've elected persons to do this and we leave it up to them. No, we have to be that driving force behind them to help them, to show to the British government that we are in fact interested in having this done, what we want done, and we support what, yes, they are the leaders, they are the one in front, but we have to just trade on the same thing. So if I as president stand up, for instance, when we had our march talking about we want our 10% raise, is not for a handful to come out, but everyone to come out so that you because there's strength in numbers, and you're as strong as your weakest link. So if they see that you don't have the support, or persons are not willing to come out or do what it takes in order to rally to have these changes made, then that is where we're going to have a difficult time. It's important that we support each other when we're doing anything in the benefit of Montserrat. So
Let
it's,
me ask a quick question. Let me ask a question here, really quickly, before I move over to Paul, because you just said something about in order to work together. What I know, however, is that you and the officers of your association, it's a union, and so the union has certain responsibilities to push and to agitate and to make things happen, even contrary to the wishes and desires of the government, the company, the whatever. But all of you are employees of the public service. The public service has all kinds of restrictions of what you can and cannot do, and there's been talk about pushback and victimization in the public service, and not being and being restricted in how you can advance if you push too hard as a member of the union. So just really quickly, Nayoto, before I move to Paul, can you just tell me, is there any consideration in the public service, in the Civil Service Association, to gain some, I want to say, some distance from the government, as in maybe while the officers are in office, they work for the association and not for government, because you're not riling up ministers or whoever?
good question. So in many other unions across the Caribbean, the president is actually seconded to the union office, still paid by government, but doing union business. But in some countries like Montserrat, unfortunately, we don't have that, which is something that we have tried to explore several times, and we should still continue to do that, because it's a lot easier. And to be honest, there's so much work to be done in terms of being a president of a union, because you're looking at legislation, you're trying to solve grievances, you are to attend various meetings. So for me, sometimes my days and my nights are just one, because you have to do the business of the membership.
Yeah.
And the other thing you talk about victimization and so on, it's prevalent in Montserrat, because they don't know how to separate the business from friendship. And for me, I'm that person. If, for instance, I've been nominated for president, I'm going to do what it takes to make sure that the business of the people is done. And persons feel because you have your their friend or their family, it means you should not comment or you should not say anything about them. But that's not what it's all about. Persons have to do the work they've been nominated or been paid to do. You must do what you have to do. And as president, it's strictly what you call it. You don't get paid, but you've been nominated and you have to do the work that is you're called to do in order to push forward. And because persons are being victimized, you find that a lot of persons draw back because they don't want to be seen, they don't want to be heard. But that's not good. You have to come forward. I myself have been victimized so many times, and I can talk about my experiences, my personal experiences, and a lot of persons would have known this. I was selected and for the job of Director of Social Security, and I was not given that job because I'm president of the association. I've been articulating and pushing for things to happen. And I've seen it. I've seen other attacks on my family. Persons have seen attack on their family because they come out and they talk and they write about stuff. But I wanted to tell a person, keeping quiet still doesn't solve the problem.
Doesn't solve the problem,
Doesn't solve the problem. So I'm already out there. I'm doing what I have to do, because in myself, I feel satisfied and I would have done the work and the business of the people.
Okay.
And my training is that you gotta say what it is. You gotta deal with the issues.
Yeah.
And I would say if it's even my mother or my husband or my brother who was premier, I'll do the very same thing because that is how I was trained. It
Yes.
doesn't matter who is in the position, you gotta call a spade, and if they're wrong, you just have to
You're
say
right.
they're wrong.
Yeah.
And Mr. Lewis would tell you when we were in the association together, if
Mhm.
he's wrong, I'm going to tell him whether he's president or not. I'm going to tell him he's wrong, and we're going to battle it out, and we're going to move it on. And when we're done, we are good as gold. But I'm going to tell you straight out, you're wrong, and this is my
I,
stance. I'm not moving from it.
I have something for Mr. Lewis. You're running out of time. We've got like 5 minutes, barely 5 minutes left. I'm getting lots of things here. Lewis, let me run this by you, and then you can just go. Somebody please tell the government it's out of order. It's appropriate to call junior civil servants and request information without going to the PS. So when I say the governor is getting involved in the governor is actually giving instructions, not just doing hiring and firing and payment and so on, and salaries, actually getting involved in the running, in the decisions of the working decisions of ministries. If the governor does not share the power of cabinet, should therefore not sit in cabinet. The governor presides over cabinet but doesn't have a vote, but she speaks for cabinet. This particular one is speaking for cabinet. There's so much going on here. There's a question of self-determination and the decolonization committee and what we should and should not do. We need constitutional reform if any of these things are going to be fixed. Mr. Lewis, elections are coming up in a year. What can we look forward to? Lewis, you with me? Can you hear me? Paul? Okay, I'm not hearing him. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. I don't know if it's frozen.
I think he's not
It's
hearing
an hour. Did the time lapse? I don't know.
No, he's not hearing me. He's frozen.
Okay. Unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. But I got so many things coming in here that are matters of interest and great import that need to be taught. Governors have been recalled before. 3 people have sent this. State of affairs requires urgent action. Yeah, Mr. Lewis?
He dropped off.
Yeah.
It's reconnecting.
Chris, can you get him in? We have like 2 minutes left. See?
Okay, so
we're having those
I was
difficulties.
trying to get him on the phone so he could talk via phone.
Let me see if I get him. Yep, we
Okay, I've got him online, so you could go ahead.
Okay, Paul.
I'm hearing you.
Okay, just the last question. We have literally a minute and a half left. We lost you just now. The elections are coming up next year. There's constitutional reform, governor's interference, all those things on the card. What do you have to say? What can we look forward to?
Yeah, I'm getting some feedback. I hope you're not when I'm speaking. But in terms of self-determination, I believe that is the wish of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And what is interesting and a start is on next Monday, next sitting of Parliament, we will be debating the relationship with the British government and the overseas territories. And that is important because the people get to hear the perspective of both the government side and members of the opposition.
Okay.
And of course, from where I stand, we cannot move forward unless we address the constitutional order.
Yeah.
Okay.
Paul, I'm gonna have to stop you. We literally I lost 2 minutes with you because we couldn't. Let me just thank these 3 of you. We have a lot of stuff here that I'm gonna send to all of you after. And Chris will talk about follow up later on down because there's so much here that's really important, not just for Montserrat, but for the other office territories, because we know that when it happens in one, the others need to look out. So we lost Mr. Lewis to technical difficulties, which might have to do with electricity and all that's happening in Montserrat. So Mrs. Nayot, Mrs. Mokia, thank you so very much for joining me. I shall send you some of these notes that I have here, and we will continue the conversation. Clearly, there's a lot of interest and a lot of confusion about what's going on in Montserrat, why it's happening, and how to fix that. And these conversations help, because if it's happening to Montserrat, it's important that the other territories pay attention, so that when it comes up, when it shows up in their area, they have an idea. Or if it's happened before, give us some advice. And it doesn't always have to be government, because we've talked about that here on this program before, and it hasn't happened. Still waiting for governments to come together and talk. But that's what things like programs like this do. Initiatives like Territories Talk allow us these opportunities.
And to share with each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and work along to each other. Yeah, it's important.
So thank you, Chris.
Yes. Good evening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sister President Mokira, Honorable Paul Lewis, and Madam Speaker, and to our very active audience from around the Caribbean, and some in the UK, some in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Undoubtedly, this is just the as we say in cricket, this is the opening bowl.
Yeah.
Of the conversation about what's going on in Montserrat. We want to thank you all for tuning in. Due to broadcasting, we are only limited to 1 hour. So we are going to have Honorable Paul Lewis and others come back to talk about that debate that they're having in the House of Assembly. And most importantly, what we want to remind the public is that the purpose of Territories Talk is to inform and, most importantly, unite the people of the overseas territories, because, as you said, Madam Speaker, if they do it to one, they're going to do it to all. And sometimes we get the impression that, oh, no, what could there's some other people that are there. No, they're doing it to all of us, all in different forms.
To learn from each other. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the recording will be on YouTube and Facebook within the next day. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And before I get murdered, I want to thank our media partners, Cayman, Marl, Channel 82 in Bermuda, CBN in British and United States overseas territories, and also PJFE in Saba. And I think this may be on ZJB. Station. I'm not sure if it's on there right now, but it may be on there. And thank you to all my Montserrat family who I've met over the last year or two. Love you all.
And thank you to everybody who joined in and who sent notes and comments. And so we're gonna pick this up again. We're gonna keep doing this. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
All right.
Mrs. Nokia, look after your voice. Look after yourself.
Yes, after that.
All right.
Yes, have a good night.
Solidarity forever.
Forever.
All right.